Assalamu alaikum. Hello and welcome to the Mansuri Perspective. Last night, the world held its breath. President Trump had threatened, in his own words, that a whole civilization will die tonight. That was about Iran. That was yesterday. And then, less than 2 hours before his own 8 p.m. deadline, something remarkable happened. The guns went quiet. But here's the real story and why it matters deeply to everyone, and especially Pakistanis and Pakistani-Americans watching right now. The phone calls that stopped that war came through Islamabad. Let me walk you through this because the details are extraordinary. President Trump agreed to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for 2 weeks, and he said so himself after talks with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir. Trump posted on Truth Social, based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran. I agreed to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. Now, listen to this again. The most powerful man in the world citing two Pakistani leaders by name as the reason he pulled back from the brink. Pakistan emerged as the pivotal mediator in this crisis, with Prime Minister Sharif and Field Marshal Munir successfully pitching a 2 week diplomatic window that has now silenced the guns and reopened one of the world's most vital economic arteries, the Strait of Hormuz. While Prime Minister Sharif provided the public diplomatic framework, Field Marshal Munir operated as the critical back channel, leveraging long-standing ties with the Iranian military, acting as a courier for sensitive messages between Washington and Tehran. The turning point occurred shortly after 5 p.m. on Tuesday when President Trump held direct consultations with Field Marshal Asim Munir, signaling that the White House viewed Pakistan's 2 week ceasefire proposal as a viable exit ramp from total war. Field Marshal Asim Munir had built a personal rapport with President Trump, visiting Washington alongside Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif after the India Pakistan conflict last year. Trump himself said Pakistan knows Iran better than most, and the Iranians confirmed it. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi expressed gratitude for my dear brothers, PM Sharif and Field Marshal Munir, for their tireless efforts to end the war in the region. That's Washington and Tehran both crediting Islamabad. That doesn't happen by accident. That is diplomacy executed at the highest level. Now, let's talk about facts and figures because the stakes here are staggering. Think about what this war did to the world's energy supply. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain combined stopped producing 7.5 million barrels of oil per day, and that number is expected to rise to 9.1 million barrels this very month. The EIA sharply raised its oil, gas, and diesel price forecast, with gas prices expected to peak at $4.30 a gallon. Now, global markets had been in free fall. After Trump announced the ceasefire, Dow futures jumped more than 900 points. International oil prices fell 13%. S&P 500 futures pointed to a 2% open. Pakistan, a country that imports most of its energy through the Strait of Hormuz, had enormous skin in this game, economically and geopolitically. So, what exactly did they agree to? The Iran provided a 10 points peace proposal. Trump called it a workable basis on which to negotiate. The ceasefire requires Iran to completely, immediately, and safely open the Strait of Hormuz. In return, the US and Israel suspend bombing for 2 weeks. Iran's Supreme National Security Council formally accepted the 2 week ceasefire and confirmed negotiations would begin in Islamabad on Friday, April 10. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif personally invited delegations from the United States and Iran to Islamabad to, in his own words, settle all disputes Friday, April 10 in Islamabad. The capital of Pakistan, it will be hosting what could be one of the most consequential negotiations of the 21st century. What's already being termed the Islamabad Accord, a two-phase framework for an immediate ceasefire, followed by broader negotiations. It could define the future of the Middle East. Pakistan's federal cabinet declared a day of gratitude and urged the nation to offer prayers for the success of the talks. Prime Minister Shehbaz said Pakistan's stature on the global stage had significantly risen, praising the coordinated efforts of the civil and military leadership. But now I have to give you the full picture, and the picture is not very pretty, I'm afraid. The ceasefire is already in danger, and the danger has a name: Lebanon. Hours after the ceasefire was announced, Israel struck central Beirut, calling it the largest coordinated strike of the current war, hitting more than 100 Hezbollah targets across Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the Bekaa Valley. At least 254 people were killed in Israeli attacks in Lebanon on Wednesday. Israeli strikes have now killed more than 1,500 people in Lebanon, including more than 100 women and 130 children, with over 1 million people displaced. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office stated the ceasefire does not include Lebanon, directly contradicting what Pakistan's PM had announced, that the ceasefire covers Lebanon and elsewhere, effective immediately. The White House then confirmed the US position. The ceasefire does not apply to Israel's war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, directly contradicting the Pakistani mediators and Iran. Trump himself told PBS because of Hezbollah, they were not included in the deal. That will get taken care of too. And this is where it gets really dangerous. Iran's sources said Iran would withdraw from the ceasefire if attacks on Lebanon continue. Reports emerged that oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz had been stopped on Wednesday after the massive Israeli strikes. Iran's IRGC warned if the aggressions against dear Lebanon are not stopped immediately, we will do our duty and give a regretful response to the evil aggressors. Let's be clear. What's happening here is that Pakistan said the deal includes Lebanon. Iran says the deal includes Lebanon. Iran actually demands Lebanon be included. And now Israel, with apparent US backing, says it does not. That is not a minor footnote. That is a fault line that could crack the entire agreement before Friday even arrives. Analysts note that despite significant military losses, including the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei on the first day of the war, Iran has counterintuitively emerged strategically stronger. Its ability to close the Strait of Hormuz proved a decisive leverage point that no amount of air superiority could overcome. And Israel's own opposition leader Yair Lapid called the ceasefire one of the greatest political disasters in all of Israel's history, saying Netanyahu failed politically, failed strategically, and didn't meet a single one of the goals he himself set. That tells you how fractured Israel's political establishment is right now. So, where does this leave us heading into Friday? The Islamabad talks on April 10 are carrying the weight of the world. Multiple unresolved issues are on the table: Iran's nuclear enrichment. Tehran's 10-point proposal included the phrase acceptance of enrichment in its Farsi version, which was absent from the English version shared with the journalists. That discrepancy alone is a ticking bomb. Then there is the fate of Iran's ballistic missiles program, a core Israeli red line. and of course, Lebanon, the bleeding wound that could reopen the entire conflict. Vice President J.D. Vance himself called this a fragile truce. That's the White House's own assessment. This certainly puts Pakistan in a very difficult position. It promised that Lebanon is covered. Tehran believes Lebanon is covered, but Washington and Tel Aviv are bombing Beirut. Anyways, how PM Sharif and Field Marshal Munir navigate that contradiction in the next 48 hours will determine whether April 10 is a historic summit or a collapse. My assessment, Pakistan has already won something enormous. Bloomberg called it a demonstration of Pakistan's central role in global politics. The UK's High Commission to Pakistan said, "Thank you, Pakistan, for the quite effective diplomatic role you have played in bringing about this vital ceasefire." For a country that has been written off by Western analysts for years, dealing with enormous pressures, regional tensions, and internal challenges, Pakistan just walked into the center of the world stage, and it did so with skill, with credibility, and with relationships that no one else in the room could replicate. That matters for Pakistan, for the Muslim world, and yes, for all of us here in America. But the guns being quiet is not the same as peace. Friday in Islamabad will tell us whether this 2 week window becomes a bridge or just a pause before the next explosion. Stay with the Mansuri perspective. We will be watching this situation very closely.